Hi, my name is Kerry Critchlow from RCR Recording Studios. I'd like to wish everybody a happy new year. I hope this is going to be your best year ever. I've had family in town for the last week or so, and so I've actually been, it's been crazy. And this is today being New Year's Day is the first day I've actually had to myself to be able to get this video done. So, yeah, let's get into it. Today we're going to be talking about modulation. Now this is going to be more of a broad overview of modulation in general, and we'll get more into the specifics of each of the types of modulations we're going to be talking about in future videos. So this may be a little bit shorter, but we're just going to touch on kind of, go over what it is, some of the types of modulation that exist as far as audio effects are concerned. And then we'll do a deeper dive on each of the different types in future videos. So this will probably be a little bit of a shorter video, but hopefully it will be interesting. So first of all, what is modulation? It is the process of changing an audio signal or sound over time. It can be used to add movement, dimension, or depth to a sound. And that's basically it. Like it comes in a lot of different flavors and types. The main ones that we'll be talking about in this are going to be chorus, phaser, flanger, and LFOs, or low frequency oscillators. This is such a broad topic. There's no way to do anything comprehensive without taking more time than it's probably worth to get into. But we are going to just look at each of these different types of things in very briefly and kind of describe basically what they're doing. And like I said, we'll do deeper dives into how they're doing these things and how you can apply them in creative ways in future videos. So let's get into it. We'll start with chorus, and chorus is basically an effect that it creates the illusion of multiple takes or multiple sounds stacked on each other, or like some people will call it a doubler, but you can do more than just make it sound like there's two voices. So let's go ahead and bring up our trusty piano here. And you may ask why I keep using pianos in these, and that's because it's a very basic instrument, and it's a great way of showing how a lot of these things, how a lot of these effects can work. But you can use these types of effects on any instrument you want. Piano is just a very basic and easy one, and a lot of people play piano, so I just thought it would be pretty universal, I guess. So we'll bring up our piano here, and let's go ahead and really quickly just put in some sort of a thing here. Okay, so I had no intention of doing this, but apparently we're doing Frere Jacques, or at least the first half of it. Very simple. Like a lot of the nursery rhymey kind of songs tend to be very simple melodies, as you can see. But anyways, so we'll go ahead and do that, and we'll put a chorus effect on this. And it should sound like you're kind of hearing multiple of them in a very real sense. So this is a chorus effect from Waves, just called the doubler. We're going to remove the direct sound. No, we're not, because this is an insert. So what this is doing is essentially just making it sound like there's multiple pianos now, or multiple takes of the same part. And so we'll play it one more time without it. All right, and then we'll turn on our effect, and we'll hear what that sounds like. And so it's doing this by essentially playing with some pitch parameters and some timing parameters. And you can, try different presets. Like all of these plugins are going to have various presets that you can use, and they're going to kind of give different effects or like whatever, different sounds as you go. But essentially a chorus is going to make it sound fuller, maybe a little wider, because it feels like you're creating multiple takes of the same part, and it creates this doubled effect. And yeah. Like I said, it's doing that by playing with some pitch parameters and some timing parameters. So if you were to say, sing, we'll take a vocal for instance. Let's say you were to sing a melody, and then you were to record on top of that same melody. Well, because no human being is perfect, there's going to be some slight variations in how the first take and the second take sound when you play them together, and that is creating that doubled effect. That's also why when you're, say, double tracking guitars, for instance, you play the guitar part once and you record that, and then you play that exact same part a second time and record that. That is going to give you that double tracked sort of sound, whereas when you just copy and paste the first take, that's not going to give you a doubled sound. It's really just doubling the volume, not giving you this kind of stereo double effect. And you can get some other kind of unique, fun sounds out of this if you wanted to. But you kind of get and we'll get into some more detail about how chorusing works, like I said, and go into a deeper dive on it. But like, I'm just trying to give you a basic kind of overview of what it sounds like and what it is. And so you can hear how it's kind of changing the sound from its original. And adding some depth, some interest, and it's doing it over time. And so that's chorus in a nutshell. And like I said, we're going to do a deeper dive into everything we're talking about in future videos. I'll do a standalone video on chorus, a standalone video on phaser, etc. We're just trying to get some basic concepts going here. And so this is an introduction to modulation. It's a very broad category. And this isn't even what I'm going to be covering is not going to be comprehensive. The next one we're going to be looking at is called a phaser. And so we're going to just keep the same piano, and we're going to put a phaser on it. And I guess real quick. So a phaser creates a sweeping effect by filtering the signal. And it does this by duplicating the signal and then applying pass filters. And like I said, we're going to get more into it later, but just as a basic kind of understanding, you'll kind of get the idea here. So we'll bring up this guy here. This is a phaser plugin. And this is the basic default setting. I haven't tweaked anything. This is just kind of how it is out of the box. And you can hear it kind of has like a sweepy sort of effect. And so it's adding a little bit of some depth. And there's different ways. Again, like there's all sorts of flavors of phaser as well. We can do, And so it's adding this sweepy sort of effect. And it's doing that by applying some filters and some other stuff under the hood. we'll get more into this in the future too, but you can sort of hear what the effect is doing to the piano, and how it's kind of creating some interest, some movement in the piano over time as it's being played. It's kind of changing as it goes. It's not kind of it's not just the same over and over again. You kind of have a movement that it's adding. And so that's where a lot of this stuff kind of comes into, these modulation effects. It's just adding interest to a sound over time as it plays so that it's not stagnant. The next thing we're going to look at is a flanger. Now, flangers and phasers can sometimes seem very similar to each other or create kind of similar effects to a degree. And so sometimes it can be kind of hard to distinguish between what's a phaser and what's a flanger, except in their extreme uses. So I say all that to say, don't be shocked if a flanger sounds similar to a phaser or a phaser sounds similar to a flanger. They're both kind of doing a similar thing. They're doing it in different ways. And so when it's more subtle, it might sound very similar. But essentially, a flanger is going to create a swooshing or a whooshing or a jet plane kind of effect. It does that by mixing two identical sound sources together and delaying one of the signals at varying intervals. And again, like, it's not. We're going to get more into this in future videos, so you don't have to know everything comprehensive about it right now. We're just kind of going over, and I sound like a broken record. We're just kind of covering what it is, how it sounds, right? So here would be a flanger effect. And like I said, it can sound somewhat similar to a phaser in more subtle increments, but as you get extreme, it starts to become its own thing, and it's creating this effect in a different way than a phaser. And so they're similar to each other, but also not the same. A little bit of a slower one. So you hear that kind of like whooshy, swooshy kind of thing. And you need to be a little careful. Sometimes it can get, I apologize if I blew anyone eardrums out there playing with this. But you can create some very interesting effects with flangers and phasers, and just, like I said, add movement over time. Make it a little bit more interesting as you go. And we'll get more into depth. We'll get more into depth for flangers as well. And the last thing we're going to look at today are low-frequency oscillators, and or LFOs for short, and they're used to change the sound over time based on various parameters. And so LFOs are probably the most complex of everything we're going to be looking at, and they also tend to be a little bit more varied. They do a lot of different things. Sometimes they can actually they're often used in flangers, phasers, and chorus effects, and so they're kind of like kind of the building blocks of modulation generally, at least the way I think about it. And for this, we'll probably want to what would be a good way to show this? Okay, well, probably the simplest thing to do would be to bring up a synthesizer here. And we're not going to get too far into the weeds on this one, but I want to just give you kind of an overview of what an LFO is, how it works, and we'll get more into depth in this kind of thing in the future. I can never remember where the initializes are. There it is. Okay. So we'll initialize. And we are going to take a sine wave. And a sine wave is it's a pretty basic thing. And we'll get into sine wave saws, all this kind of stuff when we get into the synthesis in the future. And let's actually move this up a little bit. But this is a basic waveform that you can use to build other sounds with. And we'll get into, like I said, we'll get into that. Okay, so you hear the sound of the sound wave. Now, what we can do with this sound wave, we're going to ignore most of all of this for now, and we're going to get into, and we're going to come over here to this LFO section of the synthesizer. And the LFO is using this sine wave, and it's a low frequency oscillator, which means that it's going to oscillate at a very low low time. I guess you could say low frequencies are slower than high frequencies, and so this allows us to use another sine wave as a control for the sound, and we can link that to whatever we want it to do. So let's just do a volume for now as a very, very simple example, and we will just sync it to our tempo here at 120. And so what you're going to see is as the sound is played, it's going to go up and down in volume at a synced rate. But that's what the LFO is doing. It's just controlling the volume of our sound, because that's what I've told it to do. Right? And it's very simple. It's just kind of going up and down slowly, and we can increase that to make it faster if we want. Or super fast. Right? And so all that's doing, the low frequency, is just controlling how fast the movement is going. And you can use different shapes. You don't have to use a sine wave. It's just sines are kind of the most basic. But it's just saying that it's going to follow this sort of up and down wavy movement to make the sound louder and softer. We can also have another, change another part. We can make it so that it does the pitch. So as it goes, the pitch is going to go up and down at at a determined rate. So this might sound a little wonky, but or you can do a fine. And so you can use LFOs to control a lot of different parameters over time as the sound is being played. That can include volume, it can include pitch, it can involve filtering, envelopes. We're going to get into all of this stuff in the future, but what an LFO is doing is it's just using a low frequency oscillator to control various parameters of the sound to make that sound change over time. All right? And we're going to get more into this again in future videos. And like I said, LFOs are kind of like the building blocks of modulation, really, because even phasers, flangers, and choruses are using LFOs to help them do the things that they are doing in a digital from a digital framework. In an analog framework, it would be more manual. But anyways, I hope that this has been helpful, that you kind of understand a little bit of what modulation does, how it works, and the different types of modulation. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty details of these in the future, and how you can apply them, how you can even like build them without a plugin. For instance, all of these things, with the exception of maybe the LFO. Well, no, even an LFO, you can do all of that manually. You don't need to actually use a plugin to do this kind of stuff. For instance, an LFO, you could simply just say is a volume up and down thing. So if we wanted to create a volume up and down thing, let's mute one of these. And we've created our own LFO. Now, it's not maybe as perfect as the LFO would be if it's built in. We'll just turn the, actually, we'll just turn it off for now, the LFO. So you can create your own LFO over time just by using automation, right? And it's just kind of that up and down sort of thing. And this can be any shape you want it to be. You can have it be, for instance, you can just have it be a constant rise. And then a sharp fall. So like there are lots of different ways that you can shape your LFOs. And even if we went into our software here, this is kind of like almost like a saw looking LFO. And if we were to use a saw, you can see how it goes up, and then it will drop right back down here to this smaller volume. So let's undo our automation. We'll do volume here. All right, very similar to a saw. So anyways, LFOs you can do manually. Phase, chorus, all of these things you can do manually without the need for plugins, and we'll go into more detail on all of that down the road as well. But for today, I hope that you have that this has been helpful and giving you a little bit of background knowledge in what modulation is, how it works, and a few of the different types of modulation that you can apply to your tracks. And we're going to get into more detail on these in the future. Anyways, I hope you have yourselves a wonderful week, a happy new year, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.